we have the team here with us. We've Ken, our star of the show. Now basically, for anyone who doesn't know us in ADHD Ireland, we are here, our mission in life is to support families and individuals affected by ADHD. So we have a range of psychosocial and psychoeducation supports available year-round and online at the moment for everybody who needs any support. And also we have Tricia on the support line during the day, and our number is 018748349, and you can contact us anytime on email, and we'll put those details up in the chat box later on as well. Just to let you know the running order, we'll have Jane talking for about 45 minutes to an hour, and then we'll have questions and answers afterwards. And for anybody who has a question for Jane, if you can put the question in the question and answers box, and then we can actually work with it by the end of the show, and we can actually give those questions to Jane. You can by all means chat away in the chat box, but unfortunately any questions you put in there we won't see, so we'll only see the ones that are in the question and answers. So just to tell you a little bit about Jane Hehir herself, she's a counsellor and psychotherapist, and she's been working with ADHD Ireland for a couple of years now as a volunteer with our support groups, our parents of kids with ADHD support groups. So she's known to us, but she's actually recently started CBT training for adults, and we have a course up, and actually it's sold out now at the moment. So for anyone who's interested in the cognitive behavioural therapy courses, Jane is running another one. For those of you who've checked Eventbrite and seen that it's full, we are going to be running another one very shortly, straight after the first one. So it'll be coming in on the 4th of March. But we have that, all our events are on adhdireland.ie /events. So if you want to check us out on there. But Jane herself, she works with clients experiencing a range of issues, including ADHD, autism, trauma, anxiety, depression, relationship issues. And she also works with people around growing their self-esteem, and those that are working through stress, bereavement, anger issues, but also family breakups. So it's she's a wide range of experience, and she's working one-on-ones, and now she's going to be working on our group sessions as well. There's going to be about 10 in our courses. So she'll be explaining what cognitive behavioural therapy is, and hopefully by the end of it we'll all have a fairly good knowledge of it, and you can all check out our courses later as well. So Jane, will I hand over to you?
Thanks, Nicola. Thank you. And yes, welcome everyone to this introduction talk this evening on CBT for ADHD specifically. So Nicola just, she mentioned a bit there, and I'll just maybe start by actually just briefly introducing myself. So as Nicola said, I'm a practicing counsellor and psychotherapist, and I do have a special interest in ADHD. The reason being I was diagnosed myself at age 39. So I guess I'm in a unique position, as I've seen ADHD really through the lens of a therapist, and I've also lived with it all my life. And for the majority of those 39 years, I was undiagnosed. So my passion now is really to help those understand the condition a little bit better, and that it is actually very possible when we begin to understand the condition, we can live very well with ADHD. And the reason for the CBT really is because in my experience, I found it to be a great help to achieve that goal of living well. And yeah, now I would say my passion is to provide the support for people with ADHD. And it's one of the tools that I have used myself, and I have seen positive results, and I've adapted and made changes to my life through the CBT, and it has helped me. So that's really the reason why I have started this. Now, CBT itself, I'd love to say I created it, but I didn't. It was set up in kind of late 1960s by and it was really set up to, well, created by and pioneered by Beck to really just, it's looking at change and how we look at how our thoughts can be influenced by how we view things, and that can, if we look at things differently, they can change, and we can see it from a different perspective. And yes, just in the slide there, the first slide there, just to begin with, the ADHD is just a different way of thinking. It is full of brilliant skill sets, and creative, curious, innovative, hyper focus and interest. They're all there, and it can be positive, and it can be what drives you. But there's also other parts to it that are more challenging, I would say, and they can impact your life, and they can make a difference to living successfully with ADHD. And that's the thing. And if we have the tools, or if we have the skills and implement them on a day-to-day basis, we can change how we look at ADHD, and it doesn't become such a struggle. And that's what I hope to achieve with this, with this, first of all, with this introduction, just that maybe you learned something from it that you didn't know about ADHD and CBT, and that you'll just maybe feel a bit better about it. And it doesn't have to be the worst thing to happen. It can be a positive thing if understood, and that's really what this evening is about. So I'm just going to start here. I hope this works there. Sorry there. So now there we go. So tonight, yes, the presentation. So I'm going to discuss, I've just really spoken there about why it's important to me personally. And we are going to, hopefully, I'll offer some education on ADHD and CBT, and you might learn something new, and how it is specifically going to help you, CBT. And then there'll be some information just at the end regarding the courses, which will be happening and rolling out soon enough, and how we can contact. And as I say, all of this information, the CBT and the ADHD, it's not created by me. I'm a psychotherapist, and I can provide it, but I didn't come up with ADHD. That's why. So I suppose my influence would be American psychologist Russell Barkley, and there's a few other 3 books really, Mary Salanto and Steve Safran, that I would have my information from. So it's all put together, and and this is where we're at. So what is CBT for ADHD in adults? So just to begin with, so we have there. Sorry, hope I'm okay. So yes, so what is CBT for ADHD in adults? So CBT is a short-term, the course is a short-term 10-week course, and it's goal-focused, or it's goal-orientated form of psychotherapy. And the aims are to change clients' negative patterns of thinking. And the negative patterns of thinking, the thoughts, these can create feelings. And through these feelings, these can often be negative, and the feelings can sometimes, they can be about your ability, about your behavior, and this in turn reinforces through our behavior, really reinforces how we view ourselves and how we are in the world and our future. So ADHD in adults, it's very much, and it's very popular because it is supported by clinical evidence and research. So it's evidence-based, and the results are, if we applied it daily, the results are, it's very evident to see changes if we put in the work. And they can result in higher self-esteem and in better productivity and increased happiness. So that's the actual how it can help. And there's 4 parts really to CBT that we work on specifically. So the 4 parts for ADHD would be about really working on cognitively how we change and how we view things and how we feel about ourselves. And often that's not just about, I suppose, it's often, in my case, it's 39 years of feeling that there was something else. I you know, that it wasn't ADHD. I didn't know it was ADHD. So often those labels that we attach to ourselves can be more damaging, actually, I would say, than the labels themselves. So it's looking at the impact that has had on us, and specifically, I do think for ADHD, it's because the message we tell ourselves are often we can confirm that that's what they were. That if you feel stupid, I felt I would have struggled myself, and I would have felt stupid. The messages I would have told myself wouldn't have been very positive, and they stayed with me. And just because I got a diagnosis, that doesn't mean that that's changed either. So it's looking at how we can change our thoughts, and how that just as I can have those negative thoughts, that those thoughts can be adapted, and it's possible to have positive thoughts. We can change our thoughts, and we can change behaviors, and that's the thing. And once we understand that, we can make positive change to how we are. So it starts with really, yes, with the cognitively, by changing how we think and feel about ourselves. And then the more practical part of it would be the behavioral modification, which is this is day-to-day doing things differently and coping skills. And the more we practice those, it's not about just learning the skills as we see there. It's learning how to implement them every day. And it's not just the habit, or it's not just the behavior, excuse me. It's the fact we must implement this and we must do this. And it's boring, as I say there. It requires work. But from my experience, once we are understanding of that and commit to that, it is possible. And it's through that support, actually, in that group, in the CBT group, that you're not alone, and that there's people who have maybe a different way of displaying the challenges and the difficulties, but that they're not on their own. And there's something very comforting, I would say, in a group that allows you feel that you're supported, and that you can, you mightn't have all of the executive function difficulties that everybody has, but I guarantee you there's lots there that you will resonate with, I would say. And it's learning, and it's practicing those skills day after day and after day and after day. And that's the part that doesn't really, I suppose, with the mind of somebody with ADHD like myself, it's that boring part, I'll be honest with you, and that's difficult. And unfortunately, it's only with the behavior will not change unless we apply it habitually, and that's key. And that's the challenging part, but it's also the part that makes the change, and it's where we do see change. And in turn, when we do see change in how we behave, we start to feel a little bit better about ourselves. So yes, so in practice, how would it play out? How does it look? So I just have this slide here. Just say, for example, something which would be quite common for people with ADHD to say, I'm always late. Now, to anybody else, it's kind of, it doesn't necessarily have the same connotations for someone who is who's neurotypical or doesn't have ADHD. But for somebody with ADHD, that I'm always late, that often leads to unhelpful thinking patterns, and they're automatic thoughts. It's an automatic negative, I'm always late. And it brings you down that road of, oh, this is always, it's my fault. It's my fault, and with that, it can feel very overwhelming, and it's confirming what you really often believe about yourself. And that can be that being late is bad, and being late is what is the bad part, is what becomes a familiar feeling, and that often leads to thinking I am bad. And then when we are bad, we react, we don't respond, and it's a vicious circle, and it continues on and on, to feel bad until the next time you have it filed away into the bad filing cabinet to take out later. And I would see that with a lot of with clients and myself. It's either good or bad, and it kind of goes into the good filing cabinet or the bad filing cabinet, and that grey area in between can be it's not so familiar. So it's all or nothing, and that's the way we often think in our unhelpful patterns, that it's all or nothing thinking, or it's one or the other. And how we would look at that, just the I am always late part, just say, would be, is that really true? And I mean, I'm sure there are times when we're late, but it's challenging that part. And also, if you are always late, I'm sure it's not the worst thing in the world. Now, if it's challenging how that makes you feel, and that's the emotional part. And that's what can, before we've even decided to look at doing it differently, that's nearly the message we tell ourselves. So we leave it at that. And that can be applied to anything like starting a task, starting an assignment, starting anything that we would, which would feel overwhelming, and which is very common. So starting, something that is big, that it's, sure, I'm always doing this, so why would it be any different? And that's nearly before we've started it, we're our inner critic, our inner voice is there telling us that that's how we are, and just that's the way it is. Just how CBT, just a little intro just on this, like the current understanding of ADHD, I would say, and the common perception of what ADHD is, that is a huge, plays a huge part in how we view ourselves. And that's really related to how people perceive it to be, and how people out there perceive it to be is not the case at all. Many believe that it's primarily a boy's condition, and that it's a childhood disorder. And research confirms that 70% of individuals diagnosed with ADHD as a child, it doesn't disappear when they're 18. So they maintain their symptoms in and throughout adulthood. So the difference, and this is again something that I would find in my research, that it's very much, not always, but often it's very different. It's displayed, it can be displayed differently between boys and girls. And boys often externalize their symptoms, so they can be very active, and they can display it externally. And often, and for myself, I would find it was internalized, and it was the daydreamer. It was my racing mind, and that's difficult to manage, but that's how it was displayed in me. You wouldn't have seen, looking at me, you wouldn't have thought I had ADHD. So it's how it looks can be very, very misleading, I would say. Not always the case, but it can be very misleading. So yes, that contributes, I think, to the stigma that it's very different to what you think it is. And then the definition of ADHD has changed, the diagnostic condition has changed several times over the decades. So there are misconceptions surrounding the condition, and that is the stigma that is still, it's a very misunderstood and underdiagnosed condition in adults. So there are parts of ADHD that aren't recognized, I would say. The emotional regulation, which involves the ability to control our emotion. That is something which would be, it's not in the diagnostic criteria, but it's something that I would see, and I would say it's very common, and how we regulate our emotions. Again, kind of going all or nothing, going from 0 to 100, and our reactions. And it's understanding that, and it's understanding how that plays out in our life and can affect how we live day to day. So the CBT, if we understand what it is, so cognitively change how we think about things. If we understand that and what our condition entails, we can begin to be a little bit more understanding about who we are, and separate a little bit from the ADHD and us. And so it doesn't necessarily have to define us. That's very important. And it is a neurodevelopmental condition, so it's not there's a reason, and that can be quite helpful to separate a little bit from our behavior. And that's the behavioral modification, doing things differently, and coping skills. And that's through acceptance and compassion being kinder to yourself, and understanding that there are certain things that are difficult, and there are things that I may struggle with. And the executive functioning, the day-to-day tasks can be things that are so, and that's the difficulty, because they are so easy for other people, or neurotypical people, and they can be a real struggle. And that can in itself, the fact that it's difficult to get yourself motivated or do something that you don't like. It's not a willpower game. It's not a game of willpower. It's not that I have no interest in doing it. It's that it's understanding how that is played out on a day-to-day in your day-to-day life. And for each person that is unique. So it's implementing strategies that may help. And then when we implement those strategies, we can understand our ADHD, and we can learn to accept ourselves a little bit more. And accepting ourselves a little bit more only happens when we understand our condition and how it impacts each person unique to them. So when we do understand how it affects ourselves and learn to accept ourselves with our ADHD, and the good and the bad, then we can address how it affects us when we struggle, and we can apply those coping skills. And it's like we can see a little bit clearly what it affects, but how it affects us. And that's how it starts to slowly change. It's not about fixing, I'm not going to fix anybody, and I don't want to fix anybody, but it's about applying the skills and the tools that will help you live a better life. And that's really where it can benefit you. And yes, the practice, day after day after day. And that's the challenge. And it is difficult. And that is where it's something that it's all very well getting that diary. And I've had a few of them. And it's only February, and I probably bought around 4. But it's all very well buying the diary and the calendar. But if we don't make change, and if we don't use the diary, or if we don't check it, and this is through CBT, implementing small things, looking at it a couple of times a day, every day, that's when the change happens. It's not the actual behavior of buying the diary or putting things in or putting in your tasks. It's actually about the habitual. That's where the difference can happen. Routine, structure, all those words that are not the most exciting, but they are the most beneficial, I would say, for success and for making changes. So, you know, it's all, and this is just this is back to, this would be one of my, I suppose, the stigma that's attached to ADHD, diagnosed or undiagnosed, that has a huge impact on how we view ourselves. And that's something that I would be passionate about sharing and just educating in the course, just the part that it's how it's perceived to be. And the messages are all there, and they are all around us. And you know, go outside and you look at your runners going for your walk, and and it's all about how to just do it. So something so simple, you know, it's everywhere. So, you know, look at the Nike slogan there, just, you know, slogan like this, you know, just do it. It's just, that's the message where that surrounds us. And I just, as another thing, I mean, this is the, you know, Russell Ramsey, who is a leading psychologist in CBT, he says, I know what I need to do, and this is with people with ADHD, but I just don't do it. I don't think that would sell as well, and I don't think that would really be as successful as the just do it. So that's just when something is so easy to do, and we just don't do it. What does that say to yourself, and how do we internalize that? And that's worth exploring in each person, and looking at how we can do it differently. And that's what it's about. This is the executive functioning. This would be for daily functioning, and this is something that I think more recently, in more recent years, this is what the symptoms, the classic symptoms of ADHD. I think it's the daily functioning that's personally the struggle. So for someone with ADHD, specific techniques can be applied to address problems which are related to executive functioning. And, you know, I have just the picture there of the half graph of the instructions there. That's just, it's executive functioning. It's the set of basic important mental skills that regulate how we process information, how we remember, how we make decisions, how we can react to situations, managing time, and there's more, but executive functioning can affect our self-control. It can affect our focus on things. It can affect how we react in a relationship. So it's potentially, it's how we behave in the world. And to someone who does not have ADHD, that may appear, or that may seem just why wouldn't you just? You know, you don't always have to react to, say, in a relationship, or, you know, there's other ways of looking at things. But the problem with the executive functioning is that it's very, very difficult. That's where it is a challenge. And this is so often how our behavior can be misunderstood to how we feel on the inside. It's very difficult. It's very different to how we display it, and that is something that, again, it's internalized. We don't see that. It's in our behavior. So how does doing practical tasks, like what I've just described there, how does that lead to feeling good about yourself? So how does, applying that to your life improve our general sense of well-being? And ADHD symptoms are internal lived experience at work, at home, and in relationships, as I've mentioned there, and again through social activities. So it can be about understanding even how you receive a text and you don't reply straight away, or it's not that you don't want to reply. It's that, you know, in my head I've replied, but I actually, in reality, I just haven't sent it, and that can look like a bad friend. And so it's understanding how it's displayed in us, that it's often very, very different, and it affects who we are and how we view ourselves in the world, I would say. So how we apply and implement those strategies to manage tasks, roles, situations, it's not from a lack of knowledge, or it's not from a lack of ability, or it's not from a lack of willpower, as I say. And the difficulty in executive functions, they can lead to just, these are just a few of the practical areas that they impact our life. And when we start to achieve in these areas simply as putting a plan together and you know, implementing a strategy that helps us actually succeed in something which to other people is very, very, it doesn't even seem to pose a problem, that can lead to us feeling much better about ourselves, and even just starting a task can really, just breaking down that task and setting out an agenda and actually sticking to it is something that is very rewarding for people who view that as how they internalize that and view it as a sense of who they are. And I just add that I think it's a book, and my Charlie Mackey is his name, I think, or McKay is his name, and this just really stood out, and it's just, I think it's lovely, and isn't it odd? We can only see our outsides, but nearly everything happens on the inside, and we're all very impacted, and we're all very affected by how it looks, and what it appears and what's going on inside are very, very different, and that's something that through CBT that we can, and just understanding yourself and accepting who you are, that can, it doesn't have to be so difficult, and that's where change happens. So the 10-week course, so it's just what we will aim to cover is the cognitive piece, which I've discussed. So that's how we view things and how we perceive that inwardly, and even things like there will be homework, and it's how we view that, and it's what are our challenges around that. The practical understanding of how ADHD and other conditions interfere with our day-to-day life. There's information on that, and then from there, it's identifying effective strategies and implementing them, and it's back to the everyday, and it's learning these skills, and living with ADHD. This is, you know, it doesn't require just one thing. Like if it was, I'd be doing it, I guarantee you. It's like a toolbox, and I think this is, yeah, my toolbox. So yeah, it's understanding that living with ADHD, and this is, we can learn to manage our stressors and recognize what causes, you know, us more stress than others, and how do we self-regulate and regulate our emotions, and how do we come down, and how do we just quieten our mind. And it's understanding that, you know, our mental well-being does affect our physical well-being, and that there's not something medically wrong with us, that we're not going to be cured, and being cured suggests that, you know, or fixed, that I'm broken, and I think that that's our language that needs to change around that, and this happens through making lifestyle choices. So through understanding our own ADHD and how it affects our life. And that can only happen through learning about ADHD, reading expert books. I think there's there's great resources out there, podcasts, websites, videos. It's really about understanding that you're not alone. And once we understand that actually it's not something you have to struggle with, then things can change. Support groups that ADHD Ireland provide, and there's lots of great services that they provide that can help how you view yourself, involving family and partner, and that's, you know, through, they need to learn to, medication is an option for some, and then therapy. And CBT is a good fit, as it understands and aims to implement little ways of how it affects you. And, you know, it's time, task management, organizing your stuff, you know, being practical. It's all that stuff that we really find a struggle. Coaching is another option there, and it's figuring out what works best for you. And for each person, that's unique. And it's not one thing. And that's, it's to have the toolbox there to understand what we need, and that may change, and that may be very different at the moment to when we're out again living. You know, it changes, and it's to be adaptable, and it's understanding what works for you, I would say. So the cognitions, and this is another part actually that I just thought, because you know, this is ADHD, and this can be a lot of the characteristics and how it can look like. And you know, this is again, I would be, I think, very guilty of this. I can get it done in one night, or you know, I work best under pressure, and because I like that high stimulation kind of, that's when I work really well. I nearly fool myself thinking that that's actually okay to live like that. But, you know, reality is that these, you know, when working under that stress, that can become very overwhelming. So when we are overwhelmed, we don't implement strategies and work in a way that's best for us and helpful for us. So it's understanding that, you know, we often, or I have often told myself, you know, I work really well when I just, you know, don't plan, or I'll just leave it all to the last minute, because that's when I love being also that motivated when I'm in that space, and that's what I need. If I'm not under pressure, I don't see any sense of urgency in it, and that's really it's about understanding that, and understanding that CBT, that our thoughts can impact our behaviors and our emotions. So thoughts such as I can't, you know, it's challenging that, and it's understanding that for somebody with ADHD, that may be more a natural and common back voice that we hear all the time. And those behaviors that we use to avoid, then maybe go on Facebook or do something that's not being helpful, generally end up in feelings of overwhelming or emotions of frustration, and it's a vicious circle. So I would say that the hardest part of this it's training our brains to assume the best, not the worst. And I think when we have lived a way that has been just a natural experience of not reaching our goals and where we want to be, that's our natural. We're naturally inclined to assume that it's not going to be, you know, it's not going to work out, or it's not going to be it's sure, of course, it wouldn't work out, but it doesn't have to be like that. And I really like this quote, and I've used it a few times, because I just think, well, for me, it really is how I would hope that we may learn to, and you may learn to look at things. And if we change the way we look at things, the things we look at can change. And it's just looking at it through a different lens, and that's through understanding. So yes, that is really where I am at, and that's where we are here now. So it's at this is just some information if you want to take a screenshot or something. That's the 10-week CBT course, which I think Nicola said is full. So there's another one starting on March the 4th. And then we were hoping to do a teens teens CBT course starting in April. And yes, and that's really all the that's it. I hope you've got something from it this evening, and you've learned maybe something about yourself. And yeah,
that's great.
Thank you.
I thought I unmuted there a second ago. No, can you hear me now?
Can hear you now.
Am I back on? Yeah, okay. Sorry, Jane, I was saying thanks very much for that. I was talking away to myself. But yeah, I understand a little more about where it's coming from, and I'm sure everyone else in the same boat. But I'm just wondering what a question that some people have actually mentioned to us during the week about the 10-week course. And you've explained how it's necessary to do the 10 weeks, but some may want to just pay and dip in and out. What's your take on that?
Yeah, I think the very nature of the course, the 10 weeks, and it is a commitment, and it's a big commitment, and it requires really looking at the 10 weeks to gain insight. And to dip in and out, you're not doing yourself any favors really, because you're only just dipping in, and you're not going to gain the benefits that you would if you completed it. It's a very structured course, and it's a very it's each week there is a certain criteria, and to dip in and out, I don't think it would be really doing yourself justice, or even the people in the course. It's just because the fact that it is a commitment, and ADHD, as I can say, that actually to have something that we must commit to regularly is training in itself. And I know that's maybe what we want to resist, but it is actually, no, I think to do the course, it needs to be, because it's so structured, and you're not going to get the benefits by dipping in and out. I would say there is a plan, and there's modules, and it's very, it's organized in a way that after 10 weeks, I hope that you would find the benefits. But you have to give yourself, be fair to yourself, you need to give yourself, I would say, the opportunity. And 3 or 4 sessions is not going to really, it's not going to give you the benefits that you could get from it, I think.
Okay, very good.
Yeah.
Okay, so we have a few questions here. How are we doing there, girls? Trisha, do you want to start with the first one?
Yeah. Well, one of the questions is, what would be the earliest age where CBT could be effective?
That's a very good question. And it should, I would say, for the specific courses here, they would be really over 18, but there is adaptable ones that you can do. And that's what I've been looking into for teenagers. We were saying maybe 10 weeks is a lot for a teenager to commit to. And it's really, it's really about understanding what their needs are, and the needs of a 14-year-old, I'd say, are quite different to an 18-year-old and how it affects them. But so it's just really adapting it. And I think for teenagers, I do think possibly 10 weeks may be a little bit long for them, I think, but so it'll be slightly shorter. Does that answer that okay?
Yeah, perfect. And we can talk, it'll all be advertised on our website anyway through the events page. So once it is up, you'll have decided what way it is, you'll have planned it, and it'll be working out. So it may be, as you say, it'll probably be shorter than 10 weeks. So we'll figure that one out.
Yeah. Okay,
how are we doing down in Wexford? How's Terry?
Good, good. So a question, please, Jane. Specifically for ADHD, how would you measure success of CBT? Is it always successful?
Again, it is. I'm not going to say anything is always successful, and I'm not going to. It depends how much you want to put into it. You want it yourself. Is it always successful? How much is one committed to changing? And that takes hard work. And you know what? It's very, very difficult. That work. And I'm not. And because there's no point in saying that is difficult. The daily implementation of the practical part of it, that requires, habit, that requires you to do it on a regular basis. And it's not easy, and it is difficult. Is it always successful? No. And I'm not going to say it's not successful if it's not implemented. And the secret is in implementing it daily, the practical part. The emotional part of CBT, I would say, is more, it's all very well understanding CBT, and we can understand it, but it's when we apply it, that's when the change happens. And yeah, so it can be very successful if the person is open to putting in the work, and that's the commitment.
And that's what CBT is all about, isn't it? It's about learning about yourself and working on yourself. And
absolutely, yeah. And it's not just learning about yourself. I wouldn't say, like, not just learning about it. That's really important, and educating yourself about it. That is really important. But implementing the practical part does require hard work, and it is difficult. It is difficult, but in a online session with 10 people, it's actually, there's support there, which you mightn't get from just doing it individually. So that is actually, there's something very comforting about, I think, and that's where understanding that people who are doing we're all in this together. There's something nice about that, and if nothing, like, to just doing it with a group of other people who have similar difficulties, that would be in itself that's a source of support, I would say. Yeah,
very good, thank you. Ken, how are we doing there?
Very good, Nicola, and yourself. Just I'd like to do the very first question that came in. Just before I get to that, though, just to say, I was on a course yesterday run by something called UCAM, which is a professional training body in the UK for professionals in ADHD.
Yeah, I know, yeah.
It was organised by the HSE for the clinicians to do the new adult clinics. And they were primarily looking at the non-medical management of ADHD yesterday. And just genuine, I'm not just saying it for today, and I was able to say it at the course yesterday, because one of the big interventions that they do recommend for adults with ADHD is CBT, and there is a large research reservoir out there to show the efficacy of it. But just to go back to the very first question that came in from Anna Gilbin, and she says, if you don't want to answer it, this is fine, but what brought the speaker to seek a diagnosis at 39? And can I also add on to that the question, what brought you to look into CBT as well?
Okay, very good question. So what brought me to seek a diagnosis at 39 was because I was struggling, and I struggled with day-to-day tasks, and I struggled I grew up, probably for the 39 years I wasn't diagnosed, feeling different and feeling like there was something, and I couldn't put my finger on it. And I always felt that I was on the outside, looking in at, and there was something that I could not actually, I couldn't understand why I struggled. And the labels to be honest with you, the labels I probably put on myself at that time were a lot more negative than like they were more damaging than the symptoms of ADHD, to be perfectly honest with me. And it's for an understanding. I mean, I wasn't looking for anything other than an understanding of how I was in the world, and it was really, really difficult. I had actually just and this is just my experience, but 3 kids, and I was juggling and I was frazzled, and I found it. And when I say that, it wasn't like just I couldn't, it was a real difficulty, and it was when I was trying to work, kids, life, everything, there was something. And I remember saying, God, I know I'm not depressed. I wasn't depressed, but there was something that it made sense to me when I got that diagnosis. And I went looking for it because it ticked all of my experiences that I had felt throughout my 39 years. I would have underachieved in school. I would have struggled academically. And when I look back now, I go, God, like really, that was a huge, for me, that was, we all learn differently. We all do it differently. And I was the daydreamer. I just never really fitted in, if that makes sense. And CBD, part of your question there, Ken, true, when I started studying the CBT with ADHD, I was trying to, because I wanted to be, if I'm honest, I wanted to be normal, and I wanted to do things that everybody else could do, and I couldn't. And CBT allowed me, when I was diagnosed, and I'd be very curious, and I looked at all of the research, and it just made sense with the emotional part of it, the emotional component, and how I viewed myself. It allowed me make those changes, and the practical part of it allowed me live well and live a good life with it, through implementing those daily challenges. But it's a mix of everything. I wouldn't say it was solely one thing, and if it was, it was a mix of understanding myself and accepting myself and my challenges and my difficulties.
Great, thank you very much.
Tricia, we're going across to you again.
Well, someone has asked, what would be some of the techniques that might make doing a stroke, committing to things that help less of a struggle?
Say that again there, Tricia. Sorry, just
what would be some of the techniques that might make doing or committing to things that help less of a struggle? Okay, so just say the obvious one would be the diary. I think I mentioned that, and something like implementing a routine and putting it in your diary. And it's all very well to have a diary, or it's all very well to put the stuff in, but actually use it is the difficulty, right? And it's implementing the difficult, for me, I'd say that I would have struggled with just getting sidetracked, actually. So I'd say I'm doing something, and then I would be going somewhere, I would be completely lost. I would eventually get very lost in other tasks, and then actually not do the task that I had set out to do, which was probably always actually nearly was more important than what I was actually doing. So it was through just understanding that I would equate, and I would possibly equate the level of importance of making the beds and I don't know, doing my taxes, I would see them nearly as the same thing. So it's about prioritizing which is more important, and it's understanding that there's some things that I can actually leave for the day to do, and then other things do need to be done in that day, and other things which are generally the more attractive kind of tasks that I'd be drawn to, like looking up stuff, or that isn't immediate but would let me and allow me go to that place. They are the things that I often would be doing first. So it's prioritizing that, and it's allowing for that. I'm not saying that I don't live a life of, I still do I call it faffing about, but I put it in my diary now. So for example, for me now, I put it in for 30 minutes and in the morning, and I would do another 30 minutes in the evening. And that's my going and doing what I want to do. So I escape to, and I'd be a devil for going on the web, and I do that. But it's okay because I'm allowing myself, that's because it's structured. So I'm structuring nothing, if you so to speak, in my day. And there's something very nice about that because I don't feel guilty. And then I am allowing myself that time to do what I want. And it's not I wouldn't say that's particularly self, like that's not doing something that's, but it's me and it's what I like to do. So and that's unique to each person, and it's applying and allowing that in your day, and it's structured and allowing for things to go wrong in your day, and that's through looking at your diary. That's through it's regular, habitual, daily routine that can make change.
Thank you.
Does that help maybe?
Yeah. So you're allowed to be unstructured to get structured. You know,
absolutely.
By having your 30 minutes, you'll then get into your plan and you'll keep going.
And without that, I think I'm always looking for that. So I'm always trying to get that in. So it's like if it's in my head and I know I want to do it, and I haven't structured it in, I'm not really on the task because I'm thinking about something else. So allowing me do this is it's in a structured way. I feel like because there is a part of you that's, I think, kind of the part that wants to do what you want to do, the control part, and that's kind of that's a struggle that I often would I would want to do something that's the right thing, but I don't want to do it, and it's not the willpower, it's that I find it difficult. So allowing for that in my day, that 30 minutes or whatever it is, then I'm doing that, and I don't feel then the need to so much to do it throughout the day.
That's a good little tip. Okay, Terry, have we any more?
Yeah, sure.
One or two last ones there, I think.
Okay.
Oh, loads more questions.
So can CBT help with anger management? Feelings of frustration built up from feelings of failure, which lead to an explosion of anger.
Yes, and anger management, I would say anger, like isn't that the behavior? So the anger is for what you say, the reasons behind that. And when we understand, and it's specifically related to, say, to ADHD, when we understand why you're angry, how come, how does it look to you? What is anger to you? And when we look at that and peel that back a little bit, maybe there can be, or you allow a little bit more understanding to well, maybe, yeah, it's okay to be angry, and maybe it's how we behave that we can look at, and if it's working for you, great, stay angry. But if it's not working for you, and you want to do something about it, we can look at that and applying and understanding where that's coming from, what's behind that anger, and that's the part that's how it looks, and that's how it looks to people. Often it just looks like you're angry. I've heard that a lot myself. You're angry all the time, and it's never the anger. That's how it's displayed. And that's how it looks. And there's behind that, there's frustration, I'm sure, anxiety. It's overwhelming, and it can be angry because you can't do things that you want to do, and you're angry at yourself for not being able to do them. So it's understanding that that can help. Yeah.
Very good. And there's quite a few actually questions left. I thought we were only one or two. No. We have one here, and they're talking about the course. There's a couple of things around the questions around the course itself. Would a parent of a child with ADHD benefit from undertaking the course?
A parent of ADHD, well,
just help with the routines and help.
Yes, but again, you know what? It's a commitment, right? So I would say maybe, and this is just, it's the person, if the person with the difficulties is the child, if the child doesn't understand the difficulties, it's very hard to, in my experience as a mum, even to no matter what I say, if they don't get it, or if they don't want to do it, they won't do it. So yes, it will help you understand. Will it implement change? That might be harder, and that may be more difficult. Maybe there's something, the actual course, it would allow the practical element and the emotional, it would allow, I don't know if it would be the most beneficial for the person who has ADHD, to be honest with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's more that the parent, I don't know that it's for the parent to change, to help with structures for the child. Is more for the parent of an ADHD child to maybe put structures or something in place themselves. So it probably would help them, but it probably wouldn't help the relationship between the child and the parent anyway.
Yeah, I don't know. Yeah, and I think maybe the child has to, that's something that could be figured out, what's going on there. But I think that it would be helpful for the mum to understand, or the parent to understand, but you know, I don't know if I'd recommend a specific course for an adult with ADHD, if I'm brutally honest. No, I don't think I would actually. I think there's parenting courses in ADHD Ireland on the go, isn't there? But so there's other courses, but
oh, absolutely, yeah. That was my next thing I was going to say. There are courses for parents of both younger primary school age kids and for those of teens. So we've got several different courses going, but it's just with the CBT end. Would it work if the parent was actually talking to you one-on-one and in a CBT for a CBT session, and the group are saying no, probably not. It wouldn't work for them. Just go towards the parenting course would actually benefit them more.
I think so, yes. Specifically for, perfect, to be honest, yeah.
Okay. Ken, have you found out another one?
Oh, loads of questions. It's great, everybody's getting really involved there, appreciate it. Just to say, Anna, who asked the original question, came back to say thanks very much for answering it. She's says she's probably going to have to go and get her diagnosis. She recognised a lot of what you're saying, a lot of herself and what you were saying, so she appreciates that. Someone else came back to say that they have a 17-year-old daughter just diagnosed, but she recognised an awful lot of what you've described in herself. So we appreciate that. But just a couple of quick sort of related questions just on the course. So how many people are on the course?
10. And the reason for that is to keep it small so that everybody, I think any larger than that, just even to begin with, I think it's just, I'd prefer to keep it smaller. Yes, so it is 10. And
then someone else was saying, just in terms, sorry, where's the question gone? Press the wrong button on the computer. Is there, what does Jane see as the biggest positive one gain somebody will get from doing the course?
Straight away, I hope, understanding and acceptance.
Cool. Well, thank you very much for that.
Can you pick out another one there, Terry?
Yeah, I've got one here. Would CBT be appropriate for a girl with ADHD and ASD?
Good question. Would it be? Yes. well, I think the structure part of it would be very helpful to somebody who is ASD. And yeah, I would say CBT for ASD would be more difficult, but it depends really on the person, and that's not just it's just because I don't know. I'd have to. It's how able would they be to commit, and it could be the case that yes, they would be. The strategies and implement. It depends how because like everything, they're all spectrums, and ADHD is a spectrum. So it really depends to the ability to kind of focus on, and the willingness to commitment, I suppose, to wanting to change and being able to commit to that. So certainly worth, and if they are interested, absolutely they can call me and I can talk about that, and I can certainly talk in more detail. It's unique. That's kind of, I suppose it just depends on the person, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
That's kind of following on from that, actually. Jane, there's another question here, and it's very much about talking about what you do beyond the CBT courses. There's a person here just wondering about CBT. Can you do an individual CBT session with you, and how long would it take? But how long is a piece of string, I suppose, is the...
I come here now. I know, like I you know, the counselling and the psychotherapy, it can be very helpful to understand, and that helped me personally to understand myself. And the CBT part of it was the emotional and the practical part. And individually, if there's something, again, and often if there's just kind of what you're saying, if somebody has anxiety, or, because they can often be with different kind of a comorbid condition, sometimes that might be better if it is individually, and they may get more benefit on their own as opposed to in a large group. And I would say if there's coexisting condition with somebody, that can often help. But yes, it is possible. But even like just to gain a deeper understanding of who you are and how you view yourself and how you perceive others view you, that can be very helpful. So.
Thank you. We have lots of questions still to get through. Tricia, have you pinpointed another one?
Well, just someone, does it generally make a significant difference to executive dysfunction?
Well, executive, that's like, again, how long is a piece of string? There's a lot there in executive, and there's lots in executive dysfunction. And yes, the emotional part, the daily part, you know what it does help? It makes you feel, the executive functioning and the struggles with executive functioning, they're often very simple daily tasks, and I can say that because they are often, but they can be the biggest struggle. So for me, I would find actually, yes, that would be of great help in day-to-day tasks, and not feeling bad about doing something simple like, I don't know, being on time in the morning with the kid, or just daily stuff. It can short-term memory, I suppose that's more difficult, and that requires concentration and work. But what it does actually do is, I wouldn't say my short-term memory is any better, if I'm brutally honest, but I would say that I'm more accepting of my short-term memory. So I'm a little bit more forgiving of myself, and the executive functions. And I think that's the thing, that it's not a one-stop shop and we're all going to, that's not what it is at all, but it may allow you be more accepting and understanding that, okay, there are going to be difficulties, and understanding what are the difficulties that you want to change. And, if something is really an issue that you really want to do differently, well then, yeah, I think that's a really good starting point. Yeah.
Great. We've got a couple of questions around will the courses suit 12-year-olds and 11-year-olds and 10-year-olds. We have to clarify definitely that the next course that's coming up, the one that's sold out and the next course after are both adult courses. But we will be having teen courses. We've yet to decide what kind of age group, haven't we, Jane? We'll figure that out and we'll advertise it probably around in the next couple of weeks. We'll advertise it, but more than likely it will be probably the older age, probably 15 to kind of 17 initially for the first class. The first set of courses, and maybe we will do one for youngers, but definitely the first set of courses for teens will be older kids, just for the parents who are asking that question.
And that's it. And I think the younger, I have a few younger at that age myself, and I would say there's something very nice about doing that in with other people who are similar. That's the nice part about, just say, you know, the 12-year-olds, 13-year-olds doing it together. And it is more difficult to apply. Well, in my personal experience, it's more difficult to apply, but there's something nice about doing it together, and that's the support. So that there's different challenges, I think, at different ages, and so it's just address what's possible and what can get the results. But like is the result, and this is the thing, is it like the practical part? It does, if it's not an issue for you, the practical, you know, the executive functions, if that's not a problem, then that's great. Like you don't have to, that's not going to be implementing huge change if you're okay with it. And that's what it's about, accepting if it's something that you don't, that impacts your life in a negative way, well then, it's certainly worth looking at. And only through accepting and understanding, and I know I keep kind of going on about that, but it is through only accepting yourself and actually not trying to fit in and be the same as everybody else, and then change can happen, I believe.
Very good. Okay, I think we'll just have maybe one more each, and just, I think we're nearly there. But one here, Jane, do you have an opinion on whether CBT works better for a person who's also on ADHD medication? And have you noticed any difference with the success between people on medication and not?
It can, the ADHD or the medication can be very helpful with the focusing, right? And it can be, but this is just my opinion, so I'm not a medical doctor, but it's not necessarily going to implement the strategies and put them at the skills and apply. Like, you're not going to wake up on medication and the next day and, you know, be early and, you know, do your assignment. That's not going to happen. So, and often because, you know, with adults, there's so many who have late diagnosis that there's a lot that, like, in my personal experience, there was 39 years of doing something a certain way. So that's not going to change just by, you know, just by one thing. That's going to require looking at something and doing it very differently. And it can, without a shadow, help, I'd say, with the focusing, but it still does not make you, you know, organized and just it doesn't take away the behavior, I would say, the external behavior, in my experience.
Tricia, have you one more?
Well, just on the practical side, somebody wanted to know what is the cost of this course?
They are, it is €25 per session, and it's for a 90-minute session. And there are details. I think we said, Nicola, is there details? You can contact me yourself, and we can go through that. But that's what it is per session.
Yeah, and the ads are on the Eventbrite. It actually breaks down the different payments, and there's discounts for paying the full session and things like that. Yeah. So it's all through the Eventbrite. Yeah. So if you look on our ADHDireland.ie website, on our events page, we'll have all the events, and you'll also see the parent support groups and parent training courses and any of the teacher training webinars that are coming up shortly as well. We have primary school and secondary school teacher training programs coming up, and also for ADHD training, as well as for tics and Tourette's syndrome as well. So that might be of interest to people as well. Tricia, do you have another one? Go to Terry or go to Terry. Yeah, no, I'm hitting you again. Sorry. Go on, Terry. Then one last one.
Okay, so this is your personal experience again, Jane. Did other people know you were struggling at school and in adult life, or did you just know yourself?
God, yeah, and this is where, like, because I don't want to, you know, I'm 45, right? So, like, I went to school in the 80s, so there was no such thing as ADHD. And it was, yeah, no, I really did struggle, and I really, really struggled. And, you know, I remember I was just thinking about this actually, and I was going to, not say, but anyway, I'll say it. So I remember going to, like, being sent down to the headmistress with my, because I'd done really badly in a test. And I remember being sent down by my teacher to the headmistress to tell her that I did really badly. Imagine, like. And I went down, and the headmistress thought that I was going down to say I did really well in the test, because, like, why would somebody be sent down with a bad result? And I didn't know that hard to tell her that I was down, and she thought I got just say 10 out of 10, and I got 0 out of 10. And, you know, like, yeah, no, so I really did find school very difficult. And I always, I remember even, and I remember getting my Leaving Cert results on the telephone. And I remember, like I think I lied because, and I'm not lying now saying this, but, like, I think because I was just so ashamed. And I was, and it's that shame of just feeling like I'm not enough, and just feeling less than, that took a long time. And still, I mean, I'm not, that takes a while to kind of get it out of me. You know, the way there's always opportunities to feel bad about yourself, and to feel like, to go to that kind of hole. So it's not like it's cured now that I know I have ADHD, but at least I have become more accepting, I would say. But yeah, no, it was, like, when I think of it, it's horrific. Like, as in, yeah, no, nothing was ever said.
And that's the thing. I think it's important. I think a lot of people are getting kind of real eureka moments when they come to these talks, because it takes a speaker, it takes someone to talk about it, or it takes a parent to get a child diagnosed, or an adult to know a friend who has traits of ADHD. And the amount of awareness that we're pushing out, at least it's helping, and people are coming back, and we have supports for them. But I think every single webinar that people come to, they find something new in it, and it's great. And it's been really informative, really interesting to learn about CBT, but also the fact that you're going to be staying around for a while, Jane, and that there's going to be a couple of other courses around to help. But for anyone out there that has heard their own story and their life story through Jane, definitely give us a call. Tricia's on the end of the line, or one of us, on 018748349, or you can drop us an email on info@adhd. For coming. There was a lot of people stayed around, and thank you for your questions and your lovely comments at the end. Jane, there's a lot of people thanking you, and it was an eye-opener for a lot of them, and it was lovely to have you.
Just one thing, Nicola, can I?
Yes, Tricia, go on.
Just one thing, like, comment that's come into my head now, just about these courses. Given that there's an awful lot of people there that are undiagnosed, do you have to have a formal diagnosis of ADHD to take part in one of these?
No, you don't.
Perfect.
Yeah,
that's great.
Okay.
Thanks.
And can I just say on that, I remember when I was first I was looking for a diagnosis with ADHD Ireland, and I remember it was Tricia who I spoke to. There you go.
All those years ago, Jane.
All those years ago.
And you were running with your podcast as well there too, listening to your podcasts.
Yes, I was. Yeah. There you go. There you go. Haven't stopped listening to them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's still a full circle. Anything that works, you just keep it going, don't you? Because it still works.
Yeah.
Right. Thank you, everybody. Thanks to the team, Tricia, and to Ken and Terry and Jane. Thanks very much. And your emails, you want to throw out your email and your website details again? I know it's on the screen, but if you want to give it out again.
Yeah, 086 820, do I sing a song? 820 8929, and it's Jane Hehir.ie.
Thank you.
Brilliant.
Thanks.
That's great. Thank you, everyone. Keep an eye on our ADHD Ireland website and any events that are coming up. We're going to have a lot of socials and plenty more training coming. This webinar has been recorded, so you will be able to see it on our website, and hope to see you next time.
Okay.
Thank you very much, everybody.
And thank you very much. Thanks.
Thank you.